O king, may you live forever. I then began to fear for my life. I thought that I then must confine them somewhere, for it did not matter how many chances they were given. They had bad blood in them, and unfortunately that must out, whatever our conditions. Had they been free, they would have only caused more trouble. So that is why they are in these cages, though many and many a time I have been asked to execute them. But I cannot have their deaths put at my door. I would not sleep for one moment at night again as long as I lived. How, then, can you condemn me for preferring this loyal and valiant dog to them? This is the true story of my life. More than that I cannot say. My wife will bear me out, even if you ask her on pain of death. I can understand, now you have told me the debt which you consider you owe to this dog, I said, but you have not explained the reason for placing around its neck a collar of finest rubies. After I had been 3 or 4 years as governor and adviser of the king, I saw through a telescope 2 figures, a man and a woman, staggering up the hill path from a wood. I sent the woman into the harem to be bathed and rested, and called the man before me. I saw that he was quite young, perhaps about 24. The colour of his face had become as dark as that of the smoke-blackened plate of cast iron used to bake our bread. Upon his shoulder was a child of about 4 years, a boy of great beauty, with eyebrows that met like a hunter's bow. He was very oddly dressed, and I wondered from which country he came. I said, "O man, from which clime have you come, and why are you in such a dreadfully weather-beaten condition?" "Bread! Bread!" he cried. "I am famished, and there is not an ounce of strength left in me to speak until I have eaten." I ordered food, and he started to eat like a famished wolf, gulping the bread as if he had not eaten for many days. In the meantime, a slave from the harem brought several bags, which she said had been found on the stranger's wife. They were crammed to bursting with precious jewels and rare golden items. Each one was more valuable than the last examined. "Where did you get these things?" I asked, as the young man finished eating and drinking, having fed the child tenderly with morsels from his own lips. "From Azerbaijan, my dear native land," he said, and looked very sad. "I have been through many privations since I was parted from my parents at an early age, and yet have always slipped through the claws of the angel of death." I said, "Young man, please give me all the details, beginning at the beginning and sparing no detail." He began, "When I was 10 years old, my father, who was a merchant travelling in Hindustan, Roum, China, and Europe, took me with him on a journey. My poor mother, fearful because I was still such a child, tried to persuade my father to leave me at home, but he would not hear of it, saying that the sooner I was out from under her skirts, the better able I would be to live my own life. "I am getting old," he said. "Not much time remains for me to instruct him in the ways of men, so how better than to take him with me on this journey?" We set out, despite the tears of my mother, grandmother, and several aunts possessed of most tender hearts. When Hindustan was reached, the goods were sold to very good advantage, and my father was greatly pleased. Buying some rare and precious things and some carved lapis lazuli animals, we set out for the land of Zerbad. There also we were most successful, and my father bought me some costly toys. While on board ship, returning to our own country, we were suddenly overcome by a storm of thunder and lightning of most dreadful violence. There was a terrible gale, and the wind ripped the strong canvas of the ship to strips and ribbons. Rain began to fall as if it were a second flood, and the massive rudder of the ship was shattered like flimsy kindling wood. For 10 days the ship was carried by wind and wave, like a cork upon the ocean. The captain was powerless to do anything, and the second in command was tearing his hair in despair, when the ship shuddered once and went on to the cruel rocks. I do not know what happened to my father, the servants, and our goods. I found myself on a piece of wood, floating like flotsam on the great bosom of the sea. For days I clung there like a limpet, knowing that if I did not do so, I would be swept into those fathomless depths. At last my plank was washed up on some strange shore. Somehow I stood up and tried to walk a few paces. My knees buckled under me, and it was some time before I was able to stand upright again and look around me. There, in the nearby fields, I saw people working, harvesting some sort of grain, but I could not make myself understood, nor could I comprehend what they were saying. I picked up some of the grain from the ground and roasted it in one of their fires, and they gave me something to drink. I was still very exhausted, so I lay down in a corner of the field and slept. When I woke, one of the peasants gave me a bag of something to eat, and I set off along the road. I knew not where, except that I must go on. After 4 days, when I had exhausted the bag of food, I reached a huge city wall. A great gate was open, and I walked through it. There was a tremendous amount of bustle and movement within the walls of the city, and I went up to a man in the street and asked for work. He saw that I was faint from hunger, and taking me into a room, gave me plenty to eat. What sort of work will he give me, I wondered, for he was dressed somewhat in the manner of a European. I was soon to find out. He asked me my story, and after it was concluded, handed me a spade, a sieve, and a leather bag. Taking me to a black earth hillock, he asked me to dig. "That which you dig out, pass through the sieve," he said, "and that which you find, put it into the bag." I nodded and fell to my labours. I did as he ordered me, and saw that what was left when I sifted the black earth was all kinds of precious stones. My eyes were dazzled by their beauty. They must have been worth a king's ransom many times over. I filled up the bag to the top and took it to the person who had hired me. "Whatever it is in the bag, take for yourself," he said. To my great surprise, "It will do you no good whatever to remain here. Leave at once." "Your Honour," I said, falteringly, "you are giving me all these jewels for myself? Why? Is there strange reason for this? But of what use are they to me? I have no food. I cannot eat jewels, can I?" "Ah, poor young man, how I pity you," said he. "For you, like myself, are someone from the country of Persia, as I can tell by your accent. If, however, you are determined to stay in this city, then take my ring and go to the centre of the marketplace. There you will find my elder brother sitting. Give him this ring, and he will take good care of you. Note well what my wise and aged brother says, for without taking heed, you will assuredly lose your life. Believe me, I know what I am saying." I thanked the man very sincerely and proceeded in the direction he had indicated. I saw at last the person he had described, seated on a chair, a baton of authority set with precious stones on a table before him. I approached him with respect and showed him the ring. As he looked at it, he became angry. "Did not my brother warn you?" was all he said. "Yes," I said, but I did not heed him. There are always warners in this life, but their lot is often to be ignored by fools. Grimly, the old man with the precious baton nodded. "What is your story and personal history?" he asked. I told him my adventures from beginning to end, omitting no detail. He then got up, and taking me with him, went to his own house. A servant followed with a baton of honour. I could see by the house that he was a person of some importance and wealth, for the building was a veritable palace surrounded by beautiful gardens. When we were in the innermost sanctum, he said to me, "Your coming into this city is the height of folly. I do not know how you can possibly live here alive. You have virtually dug your own grave." "I have already told you my life story," I said. "Now, as fate has brought me here, I must of necessity stay. Please tell me the reason that I may be courting death." "There is a unique custom here, that all who come to the city are taken to an idol, from whose stomach a demon tells the king about each visitor who arrives. The king forces each stranger, whatever his creed or nationality, to prostrate himself before the idol. If he falls flat on the ground before it, in the pagoda, all is well. If by any chance he refuses, owing to it being abhorrent to him to do so, they throw the poor fellow into the river. If by any chance he escapes from it, his private parts become elongated to a dreadful degree. This is an enchantment which has been laid upon this city. I feel sorry for you because of your youth and good looks, but I may perhaps be able to save you from being put into that position for at least a few days." "Why? How can I be saved?" I asked. I began to feel very uneasy indeed. "I shall get you married to the vizier's daughter," he answered. "The vizier of so large a city as this will never give his daughter to one so penniless and unfortunate as myself," I remonstrated. "Is it necessary that I embrace his beliefs? For that I will never do." No, it is not as bad as that," said he. "The custom of the city is that, whomsoever he may be, if a man prostrates himself before the idol in the pagoda and demands the hand of the vizier's daughter in marriage, the vizier has to give her up. Now, I am very close to the monarch, and he respects me, though I say it myself. Every week there is a sort of ritual visit to the pagoda, where all the officers and noblemen go upon their dignity. I will go there, taking you with me. Our conversation being at an end, he gave me leave to eat at the table, which was loaded with food, and excused himself. I went to sleep that night with something of my old good humour. In the morning we went to the pagoda. I saw hundreds of people milling hither and thither, bowing and kneeling to the idol. The king and noblemen were in the front rank, dressed in gorgeous clothes. Behind them were the unmarried girls and boys, and beautiful children of all sizes were also squatting there in front. The old man whispered to me, "Now, do as I say." "I certainly will," I replied. "Kiss the king's hands and feet, then catch hold of the hem of the vizier's robe." I did so. "Who is this, and what does he want?" said the king. "He is a relation of mine from a far country, and he has travelled many days to have the great honour of kissing your majesty's feet, hoping that the vizier will accept him into service at the court of the peacock of the world, by permission of the great idol." "If he will embrace our faith," said the king, "that will be propitious for him." A beautifully embroidered cloak was thrown over my shoulders, and then they put a rope around my neck, and I was dragged to prostrate myself before the idol. As I lay there, a voice like that of doom came from the stomach of the idol, and I shivered as I listened to it. "You have done well, O youth from far away, to enter my service. Rely upon my mercy and my favour." I was dragged to my feet, and all the people around fell flat on their faces, moaning, and it was like the sound of the sea whipped up by a great wind. Some of them rolled on the ground, with foam-flecked lips, and cried with one voice, "Let it be! Let it be! Long may you live, O youth from afar!" Soon I was shown a sight of the vizier's daughter strolling in the garden, and I was at once seized with a desire for her. I could scarcely wait for the wedding, and within 3 days I was married to the fair creature. She was perfect from head to toe, as fond of me as I was of her. We lived together in much delight, taking pleasure in each other's bodies as often as we could. But, alas, for my perfect married life, when 2 years were past, she died in childbirth and left me heartbroken. I was wandering about in the deepest melancholy when I was touched on the shoulder. I looked around and saw it was the same Persian who had arranged my marriage. "Why are you weeping?" he asked quietly. "Do you not know that I have just lost my wife in a most tragic way? Both she and our child have been dead scarcely a few hours." "You will need all your courage," said he, "for the terrible customs of this city are about to be inflicted upon you." No sooner had he stopped speaking than the people seized me and the body of my wife also, and took us to the pagoda. There they sold every item that the poor woman had possessed, and the money was spent on precious stones. They then filled a chest with bread, sweetmeats, green fruits, and dried grapes. Then they put the corpse of my wife into another chest, and slung both across the camel. They made me mount on top, and placed the box of precious stones on my lap. All the priests went before me, singing and blowing their great horns, and a huge crowd came behind. In this manner I was conducted out of the city, the first man who had told me not to enter looking at me with sorrow in his eyes as I came out. "You would not listen to me or to my brother," he said. "Now you must pay for your stay in the city." They took me to a fort, and they carried in both chests. A priest of the pagoda came up to me and said, "Man is born to die. Stay here. We have given you 40 days' food in this chest. Take it, and wait until the great idol is happily disposed towards you." I was about to reply that their great idol and everything connected with both it and them could go to the devil, but the man of Persia whispered to me, "Take care, say nothing, or they will roast you like a sheep on a spit. Rely now upon the mercy of Allah. He will save you when the time comes." The door of the fortress was slammed shut with a loud clang, and I was alone. When the 40 days were past, I was at my wits' end to know what to do about food. And then a very feeble old man was brought into the fort with his dead wife and his chest of provisions. I regret to say that I waited until the old man had died, and I lived another month on his store. In this way, I survived much longer than I would have if I had been more fastidious about what I was doing. In short, I became a complete barbarian. After some time, a beautiful girl came in with a corpse, and I had not the heart to steal her provisions. She swooned with fear when she saw me waiting wolfishly for food, but she was as good as she was beautiful, and when she realized that I was starving, she shared her food with me. She was pleased that I did not try to molest her, and we became friends. Each time someone died, we shared the food of the relatives sent in with the corpse. One day I asked her what was her story, and she told me the whole of it. "I am the daughter of the King's Prime Minister," she said, "and had been engaged to marry my uncle's son for years since we were children. When at last I was of the right age, we were married, and I looked forward to a long life of bliss. Unfortunately, my young husband was suddenly taken ill on the wedding night and died before I had known his caresses. So, when he was dead, they sent me here, and that is all." "God has sent you here for my sake," I said fervently. Without her, life would have been insupportable, for she kept me happy, or as happy as one could be in those circumstances, just by talking to me and doing me small favours. In this way we became more and more used to each other, until at last I taught her the principles of my religion, and she begged me to convert her and take her as my wife. I did so, and myself recited the marriage ceremony. Nearly 3 years passed, and we had a child. How were we to escape from the fort and live our lives as free people, I wondered. One night, I saw someone in my dreams who said to me in a voice of thunder, "There is a space for outlet through the drain. Go forward and enlarge it." I woke, began to collect all the nails and pieces of metal I could find. Day by day, I began to enlarge the opening in the drain, and after what seemed an eternity, it was big enough for us to get through. I then put the finest of the precious stones into the sleeves of a garment belonging to one of the dead, and we escaped at last into the light of day. We offered fervent prayers and thanksgiving for our deliverance, and I put the boy on my shoulders, leading my wife by the hand. It is a month since we escaped, and still we cannot believe that we are free from that ghastly place. We have lived on berries and fruits on the hills, and leaves and corn from the fields when we could find nothing else. I have not the strength left to add one word more. I beg you, please allow me to leave your presence." I took pity on him and sent him to be bathed and dressed in the finest clothes of high quality. I gave him honours and made him my deputy. In my own home I was unhappy. I had several children by the princess, but they had died one after another. I could never find out the reason for this mortality. The country became disagreeable to me, and I was determined to return to Persia before I died of melancholy. I asked the king's permission to leave, and got the position of the governor of the port transferred to the young man I have just mentioned. The king died also. I took all my jewels and my faithful dog, and came to Nishapur, so that no one would know the story of my brothers. Now I am known as the dog worshipper, and pay double taxes into the exchequer. It so happened that this young merchant went to Nishapur, and owing to him, I have had the honour to kiss your Majesty's feet." Surprised, I asked, "Is this young man not your own son, then?" "King of renown, he is not," he answered. "He is one of your Majesty's own subjects. He is now my heir, and I will leave him all my goods when I die." I then addressed the young merchant and said, "What merchant's son are you, and where does your father live?" Whereupon, to my surprise, the youth kissed the ground before me and said, "I am the daughter of your Majesty's vizier, and my father came under your royal displeasure because of the story of the collar of rubies worn by a dog in the city of Nishapur. In disguise, I went to that city with my nurse's husband as my guardian and guide, in order that I could clear my father's name. Here is the merchant, the dog, and the collar of rubies. So please, your Majesty, allow my poor father to be released." On hearing this explanation, the old merchant fell forward in grief, and was only revived by rose water being sprinkled on his face. "Oh, that I should have found a son whom I thought to be as perfect as if God had sent him to me, only to lose him. Now my name and my line will disappear, while I have no son to carry on my family name." In order to console him, I whispered into his ear, "Do not grieve, for I will marry you to her, and you shall have children from such a valiant young wife. You are still in the prime of life. Do not despair. Allah will give you a family, if it pleases him." I then ordered the vizier to be taken out of prison, and paid him full reparation. I sent the beautiful daughter to the harem to be dressed as a bride, and she delighted to be married in great splendour to the tall, distinguished, silver-haired merchant, whom she no longer looked upon as a father. In a few years he had 2 sons and a daughter of his marriage, which turned out to be a real love match. The elder is now a vizier in his own right, and the youngest the chief steward of my household. O Dervishes, I have told you these adventures for the reason that, last night, I heard the stories of 2 of your number. Now, you 2 who remain, think that I am still where I was last night, and think me your servant, and my house your monastery. I beg you to relate your histories without fear, and stay at least some days as my honoured guests. When the Dervishes realized that the king was generously kind towards them, they said, Be pleased to hear us then. We will relate all that you wish to know.